Congressional Republicans and the White House have still not met for negotiations about the debt ceiling ahead of next month's looming deadline. The federal government hit its debt limit earlier this year. House Republicans did narrowly pass legislation to increase the debt ceiling by $1.5 trillion last week, but called for reduced spending and reversing some key policies backed by President Biden. ABC's Jay O'Brien joins me now from Capitol Hill, along with ABC's Karen Travers from the White House. So, Jay, I'm going to start with you. President Biden recently said he will not be negotiating with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. What are Republicans on the Hill saying about that?
Well, the Republican strategy, Alexis, is to try to turn up the heat on the White House. You mentioned that legislation that was passed yesterday. That legislation is not likely going to go through the Senate, not likely to make it to the president's desk. But it was an attempt from House Republicans to try to pressure the White House to come to the negotiating table. We just heard from Kevin McCarthy, who's speaking in Israel on a congressional delegation trip there. And he said the president still hasn't talked to me in relation to the debt ceiling. So you're hearing this messaging from Republicans to try to force the White House to come to the table. In fact, at that press conference in Jerusalem, there was this telling moment where Steny Hoyer, who was a former Democratic leader in the House, said there's universal agreement amongst Democrats and Republicans that the White House, or that the United States government, rather, will not default on its debt. And then you saw Kevin McCarthy step to the podium right after and say, yes, but we are not going to vote to raise the debt ceiling without some kind of concessions on spending cuts from the White House. That's the disagreement right there in black and white. And we're hearing House Republicans like Steve Scalise over the weekend, again, try to turn up that heat on the administration. Here's what he said.
President Biden is clearly trying to run out the clock and create a debt crisis. That's irresponsible. The White House needs to ultimately get into this negotiation. The president's been in hiding for 2 months, Martha. That's not acceptable to Americans.
And look, the White House has said they are not going to negotiate on the debt limit because they're not going to allow Republicans to try to hold this item, as the White House views, hostage to get spending cuts. That said, we are hurtling towards that X date where all of this comes to pass, and there's the potential for default that's estimated to come sometime in June, and if not June, July, and nobody moving out of their corners right now, Alexis.
And of course, a default would be devastating for our economy. Karen, tell us more about what the White House is saying about this, and also wondering if you can tell us what they're saying about the collapse of First Republic Bank after the FDIC had to seize that bank, and then it was ultimately bought by JP Chase.
Alexis, we can start there with First Republic because the president did just bring that up in his remarks at a small business event in the Rose Garden. The president said that regulators took action to protect deposits, but taxpayers are not on the hook. This message is something we have heard from the administration before with previous situations like this with other banks. And the message is it's not a taxpayer bailout. He said that depositors are being protected, shareholders are losing their investments, but underlining that taxpayers are not on the hook here. On the issue of the debt ceiling, for the White House, there is no negotiating on the debt ceiling. You know, you heard Steve Scalise there saying the president's absent on this and should be negotiating, but they're drawing a very firm line in the sand on this one. They say there is nothing to negotiate on the debt ceiling. The president will not have that conversation with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy because they say Congress just needs to vote to increase the debt ceiling. And the message we keep hearing is they did this many times before, including 3 times when House Republicans were in charge of Congress, when Donald Trump was president, with no strings attached. And they say now there are politics at play. The president has said he will talk with Kevin McCarthy about budget issues and spending cuts, but only when the threat of default is off the table, only when the debt ceiling has been raised.
Let's hope they can get that deal done before the deadline. Jay O'Brien, Karen Travers, thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.